Welcome. Uh, Welcome to this webinar. My name is Hardy Merriman. I'm President and CEO of the International Center on Nonviolent Conflict. And we're thrilled today to share with you this webinar, Ekta Parishad, Practices and Insights from one of the largest social movements in the world. So for over 30 years, Ekta Parishad, which we can translate roughly into English as Unity Forum, has engaged in a combination of community organizing, empowerment programs, and nonviolent civil resistance to improve the lives of rural poor all over India. As a movement, it's comprised of 300,000 families in 15 provinces throughout the country. And as an organization, it's an umbrella that includes over 2,000 trade unions, cooperatives, and social organizations. I first learned about Ekta Parishad when I met Ramesh Sharma, one of our speakers today, years ago. And I was immediately fascinated by this movement that is over 30 years old, that is comprised of, over a million or millions of people, that is organizing in challenging and adverse circumstances and finds a way to continue to build and grow. When we think about movement, sometimes a movement lasts for a year or two, sometimes 3 or 4, rarely 3 decades spread out widely. There's a lot of wisdom among the organizers and lessons learned and practices that we can draw from today. 30 years is pretty long for a movement, and especially when you talk about its geographic diversity and its spread and impact. So ICNC was very fortunate to be able to work with Ramesh and Ekta Parishad and write a grant with the purpose of producing a manual and any other educational resources to try to get lessons learned and details of the methods of organizing. And we're very excited that this manual, A Guide to Nonviolent Activism, which is beautiful, has been released and is freely available online. And for the first part of this webinar, we're going to engage in dialogue with Ramesh Sharma and his co-author Kush about Ekta Parishad and the new guide. And then we're going to hear from a panel of activists, including Valerie from Burkina Faso, and Sumbun Chungprampri, who goes by the name Mu, from Thailand, to share their reflections on their work and any lessons from Ekta Parishad they want to bring in. So why don't we begin there? And I will introduce Ramesh and Kush, and then I will introduce Valerie and Wu later, right before they speak. So Ramesh Sharma is Ekta Parishad's national coordinator. He and his team have continued in the Gandhian tradition of constructive resistance by building alternative institutions to increase self-reliance, while also engaging in rallies, marches, and other mobilization to achieve reforms, protect rights, and demand access to needed resources for villagers across India. And Ankush Vengurlikar is an international grassroots media trainer and co-founder of Adivasi Lives Matter, an indigenous people-led media initiative in India. He's consulted and trained over 250 organizations internationally on using digital communications to tell stories of marginalized communities. Ramesh and Ankush, welcome. It's really great to have you here today. Thank you. Thank you. Great. So I'm going to start with a very simple question. I talked a little bit about Ekta Parishad. I want to hear it in your words. What is Ekta Parishad? What are the goals of Ekta Parishad?
Yeah, first, thanks to Hadi and ICNC for giving us this opportunity, the big opportunity for producing a manual as well as for this webinar. Regarding Ekta Parishad, I would prefer to say that Ekta Parishad is a school of nonviolent thoughts and action. Ekta means unity, Parishad means forum, is a membership-based people's organization. And since its inception in 1990, Ekta Parishad devoted to secure justice and peace to the marginalized community across various states of India. Ekta Parishad is grown as an umbrella organization, directly working in nearly 12,000 villages in 15 states of India. So as I said, it's an open school of nonviolent thoughts and action, as well as the second biggest identity of Ekta Parishad is one of the biggest membership-based organization working across different states of India. Hadi.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, can tell us a little bit more about the activities that Ekta Parishad does? Maybe like some examples of campaigns you've organized as well.
Right, right. So we had a various set of activities, and it's actually sometimes varied from state to state because India is a big country. And if you are working in the northeast or you are working in the south coast, the activities, the geography, the language, the situation, the socio-economic context will be completely different. But let me just highlight that what are the key activities of Ekta Parishad. So I would prefer to divide into like 4 blocks. The first is building community-based organization, which is very, very fundamental for us, which is extremely important for us because this is the only way to start strengthening the community to speak out and to stand up and to start campaigning or start doing some constructive work with their own. So it's not just a kind of a hand-holding support, but it's a process of building the realization among the people, among the marginalized people. So that's the first thing, which is community-based organization and building community-based organization. Second is a building community leadership. We know that, I mean, we're known as one of the biggest champion of democracy in our country or globally. And we know that the soul of democracy is opposition. In India, we are known for 650,000 villages, but there's no opposition. The panchayat system, it's only based on one linear pattern of administrative arrangement. So here, when I say building community leadership, that means we are actually trying to build or to strengthen the democracy from bottom-up process. And that's how we have a very interesting examples of conducting these leadership camp in different parts of India. The third key activity is a building campaign. For the local action, for the state level action, for national action, and very recently we did one action at international level also. But the larger focus of all these campaign is to ask for land and livelihood rights to the marginalized community. And in Indian context, when we say marginalized community, that means they are the indigenous people, they are the Dalits, they are the fisher folks, they are the single women, they are the nomads, and there are a large number of people who are completely unheard over last 70 years. So the building campaign is a third major activity of Ekta Parishad. And the fourth and final one, I would say, it's a building land and local resource-based economy. Fighting for land, it's a long story of Ekta Parishad's journey. But after getting the land, how to sustain the farming, especially in a country like India, where we are known that in the past more than 15 years, more than 300 farmers who committed suicide, and there's a lot of critical comments about the Indian agriculture. So we know that the people who actually getting their land after their long fight, it needs to sustain in a constant way so that they can build their sustainable agriculture or sustenance agriculture based on their local resources and strengthen the local economy rather than the big economy. So these are few interesting set of activity which Ekta Parishad actually involved with.
Wow. I've been taking notes, and I'm going to keep looking down and taking notes while you talk, as I've done many times before, actually, Ramesh. And I mean, I have like a dozen other questions that aren't even planned now, but I'll sort of weave the next two together. You use the word realization in your answer right now. The word realization is used in the manual. I wanted to ask you, how does a person join Ekta Parishad? And maybe what is the process of realization or training or integration into Ekta Parishad that they go through?
Right. First, very briefly tell you about the whole process of realization. Since beginning, in fact, I mean, the name Ekta Parishad given in 1990, but the people who were the founder of Ekta Parishad, they have started their work way back in 1970-71. So at least maybe 20 years even back. So we had a long history of activism of over last almost 50 years. So the whole process of realization, when we say realization, that means it's basically Ekta Parishad is an organization focusing on the rural population of India, who are still 70% of the total population, and they are deprived. They are deprived out of their rights, because of many reasons. But the one reason which we need to understood very well is that there is a big disproportion between the resources and opportunities. Few people, they have all the resources and all the opportunities, and the large sum of people, they don't have either resources or the opportunities. And that's the real tragedy of the rural population in India. So when we start the process of realization, we do ask maybe 50 to 100 young people in the village to come for the 3 days. This is largely kind of a residential camp. And we start, it's a 3 days process. It's a very simple, and it's a process of realization. It's actually divided into 3 blocks. So the first day we devote to understand and to discuss about the situation, about the poverty, about the deprivedness. The second day we actually devote to discuss about what we can do together. And the third day, actually, we explore the possibility of building alliances with those organizations, with those known and unknown people who could be a good friend in our action. And these 3 days camp is without pen, without pencil, without chart paper or PowerPoint presentation. It simply is a conversation mode. And I would like to invite all of you to come and to spend the days with us, the 3 days, and you can see the spark after 3 days. So the process of realization has also a philosophy that we want to build a leadership from the bottom. We don't want to take a leadership from outside and to ask the community to follow this process. And when I say to make them realize, that means also they have a different capacity. So we call it the power of the poor. So understanding the power of the poor rather than providing them capacity is to understand the other way around. So this actually helps us to design a various action. And the foot march is a classic example. I mean, they are the people who walked every day 15 to 20 kilometers. Asking a young people from the city, come and join us to walk 25 kilometers a day, it's a little difficult. So this is the one capacity. This is the one strong power they have. So this is the process of realization. But coming back to your question, how does a person join Ekta Parishad? We can divide in simply 4 or 5 blocks. The one is the membership, which is a very simple. Anyone can get a membership of Ekta Parishad, which is a 10 rupees per year. I don't know, I think it's a 1/7 of a dollar, something like that. And it's an annual membership, and we do provide membership to the family. It's not an individual membership. So suppose if Mo or Valerie take the membership, the whole family of Mo and Valerie, it's treated as a member of the organization. You can also join as a volunteer. We have our own volunteers policy. We have a space for national and international and local volunteers to come and to spend their 2 months, 3 months, 6 months with us, and to engage with some of the grassroots activities here. You can also join us as an activist if you want to really devote your life for the cause of the poor people. You can be a part of the Ekta Parishad for a long time and to work as an activist in the ground. And when I say activist, that means necessarily they have to based in the rural setup, not in the offices. We don't have a concept of offices-based activism. You can also be a part of the larger alliances and the solidarity circle. As Haji briefly introduced, that we have a big alliance and solidarity circle of 2,000 plus organization in India and nearly 500 plus organization internationally. So these are some area where you can join easily.
Wow, I really first hearing the process of realization is very powerful. I would love to see it and watch it. It makes sense. That 3-step process you describe, and yet it's very profound. And hearing you talk about all the different ways that people can join and contribute is, I think, a really powerful lesson for movements everywhere, right? Like, different people are going to come with different skills, different opportunities, different time commitments, different willingness to sacrifice, or you name it. And it sounds to me like you are providing a way for lots of groups to feed in at ways that feel appropriate and right for them. But they have to do it consistent with your principles. And I've never heard the expression no office-based activism, but I think I'm going to start using it more now. So thank you. We have a few more minutes, and then we're going to move as well to Ankush and the guide. Ramesh, one of the things that has always amazed me about Ekta Parishad is how can you get such a large decentralized entity or movement to make decisions? And I understand that there are local decisions because there's local leadership, but then Ekta Parishad also sometimes decides things as a collective movement, is my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong. Can you talk about decision making? I think decision making and the stresses that that can create on a movement is a reason why many movements collapse. It's not even necessarily the adversity or the opponent or that their movement is facing. It could be the own challenge within the movement of resolving its internal conflicts or of making decisions. Love to hear you talk a little bit more about that in the next few minutes.
Thank you, Hadi. This is a really very important question here. And in the beginning, when I said that we are a membership-based organization, that means we believe in the process of horizontal discussion, horizontal leadership, horizontal decision-making processes. So the first basic unit in the whole structure of Ekta Parishad, we call as a village Ekta unit. This is a kind of a one committee of the villagers who are the members of Ekta Parishad. So this Ekta village committee in the local level, it's actually key unit which is responsible for planning and organizing local action. And when I say local action, that means the action which could be easily resolved with the help of local administration or with the help of local politicians, or with the help of the local administrative setup, largely. So we no need to do national action for one village, or maybe. So this is the kind of a one very basic and fundamental. The second level is the federation of village unit at the district level. Suppose if you are working in 100 village in one X district, so the whole federation of 100 village, they make a coalition for the district level, and it's called a district unit. And they are mainly responsible for the next level or the next circle of planning and action, which actually needed at the district level. The third is what we call as a federation of district unit in one particular state, are mainly taking a lead role for designing action at the state level. So suppose if, like in central India, we are working in 40 districts. So the two representatives from each district, they become a part of the state level committee, and then they are the one who decide the action at the state level. And similarly, it's happened that the two representatives from the district level, they become a part of the national level committee, and the national committee is mainly responsible for designing and executing the national level action. So we do have a strong belief in horizontal leadership model. That's how the membership is a core of the organization building and sustaining the campaign in a long run.
That's amazing. You have created parallel democracy in a sense, it sounds like, or in the highest, I mean, many different states call themselves democratic, but I mean democracy in a really high sense of representation and accountability. And that is, it's remarkable. I can only imagine how much time and energy and effort it has taken to set those structures up. Thank you, Ramesh. And I want to invite in Ankush as well to the conversation. And so let's the three of us engage. But we'll start with Ankush. The Guide to Nonviolent Activism. Tell me about the guide and what information it includes.
Right. Thank you so much, Hardy, and the entire team of ICNC who has gone behind planning this beautiful webinar. And thank you to all the audiences who have taken out the time to be here and attend this webinar. The guide is an effort and attempt to bring forth the experiences of Ekta Parishad over the last 30, 40, 50 years in India. And, which is how it was a constant challenge while we were doing the guide, because this is but a slice of the gamut of things that are happening globally on nonviolent activism. This never aspires to be the one path for doing nonviolent activism. And that is not even the ideology that Ekta Parishad believes in, because Ekta Parishad, being the alliance that it is, continues to learn, continues to grow from nonviolent activism of thousands, if not millions, of activists across India and across the world. So in that sense, this guide is one such attempt to highlight the initiatives of a beautiful coalition, a beautiful alliance in India, which has been doing this work for decades together, and to present to its readers with some theories, some concepts, some ideas, some actions, some examples that have worked in a country as complex as India. And all of us know, given the size, given the diversity, socio-political, geographical, linguistic diversity, if this has worked in India across 15 odd provinces, then there's something right which is being done. And that was an attempt to document this and present this in the form of a guide to its readers. So to answer your question, the kind of information that has gone in it is mostly built upon the experiences of Ekta Parishad and its alliances. Ekta Parishad is not a singular organization, but an alliance of activists and multiple other organizations. And that is essentially what goes into this particular manual. We've tried to keep it simple, relatively. I don't know how one could simplify non-violence, especially in today's world with extremely complex violence is taking place across different parts of the world. But we've spoken about violence as a larger structural issue to begin with, which Ramesh bhai mentioned. It emanates from the haves and have-nots in terms of the access and opportunity to resources. By when we say that the indigenous communities or the rural communities are the ones with the resources, and because of resource grab, that is how the violence gets rooted into the system, which manifests itself in then multiple ways. So we start off with that. And then we touch upon nonviolence as the way of life rather than just a strategic action. And this has been the ethos of Ekta Parishad, where, like Ramesh bhai mentioned, you don't do activism by doing a 9-to-5 job. It is embedded in the ethos. It's almost a way of life. And this is what we learn from the greats, from Mahatma Gandhi, from Nelson Mandela, from MLK. This is what we learn, that non-violence becomes a way of living life and not just something that you ascribe to ideologically or intellectually. And then we talk about how nonviolence basically transcends from an individual realization process to a larger group. And that group could be your peers, the group could be a very small circle of influence, to then going and building into communities and organizations, and then even, transcending the borders of state or nation. All of this is built on three solid methods that Ramesh bhai mentioned, which is building democracy, building leadership, and building grassroots campaigns. And while we're doing that, if you look at Ekta Parishad's work and the work of nonviolent activism that Ekta Parishad has done in India, it comes under the three large categories that even Ramesh bhai spoke about just now. And I'll just reiterate it because we cannot state it more often, is Sangharsh, which translates as struggle, Samvad, which translates as dialogue, and Rachna, which translates as constructive action. And so these three become the basic tenets or the basic foundation stones for nonviolent activism. And how we've tried to structure that, Hardy, is now I have been a reader of manuals, and I'm not a very avid reader, which is why I would always look for something to do, something which elicits action. So I'm a doer, not so much of a reader. And we thought that was the sort of experience that we would bring to other readers of this guide as well, where each chapter is broken down into three simple parts. we speak briefly about the concept. We share some relevant examples from India or from elsewhere in the world. And at the end of that, we have formulated some basic questions which the readers themselves can go through and not just take this guide as an informational document, but also an assessing document, so they can assess themselves. And on the basis of that, grow their own understanding, grow their own learning. And that is essentially what the last part of the manual also is, the way forward. It's great that they have taken out the time to read all of this. How can they act upon the information that they have with them? So this is briefly how we have structured the manual, the guide.
Great, thank you, Kush. And my comment, or one comment when I read it was, I found it incredibly thought-provoking. It was really provoking me to reflect and consider my circumstances and to consider the broader situation and the way in which society does things. It wasn't telling me what to do, but each page really was like an inner dialogue that I had with myself and my own conscience as I read it to think through the questions that it raises. And so it really impressive and a different kind of guide than others that people might have read, which are really like 1, 2, 3. This is how you do it. This is a different sense. This sort of calls on you to figure out how to do it, but gives you some guidance and structure. I want to ask a little bit more about like, how did you develop it? Where did the knowledge come from in the guide? Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for that question. So back in April 2019 is where about 40-50 of us got together in southern India in a place called Madurai in Tamil Nadu, in a beautiful center of nonviolence. And there was a deliberation, there was an ideation that took place over a few days, almost a week. And so again, one cannot just say that it was 1 week of discussion among a group of 40-50 people, but people like Ramesh bhai, people like Rajaji, people like Jill, who have been the founding members of Ekta Parishad, they come with decades of experience. So to gain from their experience of decades, and then also the whole idea, Hadi, was to make this as intersectional as possible. So among the people who were there, we had artists who are using all kinds of performing arts to express nonviolence. We had poets, we had hardcore activists, we had rural activists, we had urban people, we had people from academia. And so the whole idea was to try and gain from all of these individuals, gain from their perspectives of having worked on nonviolence, and to put it all together in the form of a document. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is not the be all end all, but this is definitely an attempt to present what has been happening in Ekta Parishad and its alliances over decades of work. While that was the beginning in April of 2019, after that, there have been multiple rounds of discussions, because as Ramesh bhai would point out again and again, this is not a top-down sort of a document that we are building on. We are basically just giving a face to the work that is happening at the grassroots, And so deliberations with grassroots activists, with the team members of Ekta Parishad have constantly been taking place. And in fact, we are so happy that while we are seeing the document in English, the guide is also being developed in Hindi, which is a far longer document even, because Ramesh bhai goes into a lot of detail in Hindi as well. And that will be circulated among the activists who speak the language. So there'll be a far bigger audience internationally, of course, with English, but also within India and the Hindi speaking nations.
That is great. All right, Kush, we have 1 or 2 more minutes, and I'll ask you one more question. Just talk about, like, if you were to say like the few key goals you have for it, or how anyone around the world might pick it up and use it. What are a few thoughts you could share on that?
Absolutely, Hadi. Thank you for the question. The whole idea, as you mentioned, and I think you've hit the nail on the head, on what do we intend to evoke with this guide, is a process of self-reflection. And and that's also been a personal journey. The process of developing this guide to nonviolent activism has forced me to look at my own actions. And that's basically what we want to elicit among the readers. on whether non-violent activism is just a removed activity that we take on when we wear those clothes or when we go to an office, or non-violent activism is something that we are trying to imbibe in our lives through our actions in multiple phases. And that's sort of what we urge the readers to do. So take this guide as a document to reflect upon your actions, upon the actions of your organizations, your alliances, your peers, and your colleagues, and try to build on from there. So we are not saying that if you're not doing as much, oh, you're not good enough. Of course not, because it's a continuous path and all the nonviolent activists are constantly building upon experiences. So let's take this as knowledge that something like this is being done. Let's also take this as a congratulatory message to each and every nonviolent activist across the world, because we're all trying to figure it out. It's extremely different. What has worked in a village in Chhattisgarh in India may not work in Florida, may not work in Canada, or may not work in Thailand. We are all trying to figure out our ways across the radicalization that's happening in the world. And so let this be a message to you that you're not alone. You have the strength of millions of nonviolent activists across the world standing with you.
Thank you, Kush. Thank you very much. It's great to hear from you. And we're going to come back in question and answer a little bit in discussion for people to revisit with Kush and Ramesh. I now want to invite in Valerie Traore, who is the founder and executive director of NIEL, which is an advocacy and campaigns agency based in Senegal. Valerie is originally from Burkina Faso and has been actively engaged in activism for the past 20 years. So Valerie, great to see you. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Would love to hear you share a little bit about your work, as well as any reflections you may have on what was just said and where it might intersect with your work. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be part of this panel, not the least because of the work I've known and the engagement with Ekta Parishad over the past several years. So I'm Valerie, as you said, I'm from Burkina Faso, and for the past 20 years, I have been working with a very conscious individual, but also organizational commitment to human rights. I think that's the basis of it. And one of the things that has driven that for the past 20 years has been the very clear commitment that, to me, there is not a hierarchy. So right to land, education, health, all of that is important. And pretty much what it is the driving force of how the world is organized today, as we know, is a violent system, and a system that keeps people in oppression, that keeps people at the bottom, and that keeps people marginalized. So my own personal journey and my own personal value has been, how do you shift that balance, and what role, however small it is, can you play in helping balance this out a little bit? And because of that, my fascination over the past 20 years has been, how does change happen? What makes it happen? What do you need to look at? What do you need to pay attention to? How do you change yourself in order to step outside of yourself and be able to contribute in a way that is meaningful? And through that process, working with different organizations, for the past 20 years, I specifically decided to create this organization, the Yale, with a real focus to work with a wide range of organizations wherever they may be, whatever issue they may focus on, that has at its basis, how do you engage and sustain the realization of human rights for everyone, especially those that are not living that reality today. And supporting organization in questioning and map how to engage. That has meant that over the past 12 years, I've worked with everything from youth movements, farmers organizations, small to large NGOs, foundations, political activists, as well as politicians. And those that are really at their core saying, how do I shift the world in a way that actually gets all of us to a better place? And it's in this process that I was fortunate enough to meet Ramesh and to meet Ekta Parishad in their work. And in terms of the one of the things that I love and respect the most, one of the many things about Ekta Parishad, is to what extent the strength of the movement, which you mentioned, Hardy, and Ramesh spoke about, over 30 years, and the recognition that it takes time, that it takes time, that it takes commitment, that it takes living your throughout the process. And it's not just a thing where we count a lot, and this is in a lot of the work that I've seen, that I've done, these spontaneous movements, right, of frustration. That has happened in my sphere. I live in Senegal, but in West Africa over the past few years. But the main question has been, once either there's a win, or once that moment is gone, how do you sustain this knowledge and this citizenship along the way? So that to me was huge. The second is the level. I think you mentioned that in your question to Ramesh, how structured it is, and how at every level of the structure, the values that drive it are important, and the values that drive it are relevant. And obviously the resilience that comes with it. Now, in the space within which I work, India, the sheer size and numbers of an organization based in India are not to be compared with Senegal or Burkina or the Gambia or Niger, but there's definitely lessons to that, and especially being founded on those values. And that's even why I pretty much non-violently arm wrestled Ramesh to be on our board, just to make sure that we're always conscious of those things, that because of the diversity of the work that I do in the different organizations, Kush said, sometimes it tends to start to look like work, whereas the foundation of why you do it, that has to filter itself through everything to how you behave, how you engage, how you work with people is critically important. Now, just a couple of mentions, and I think it's linked to that, and coming back to the manual, is that over the past few years, for those that have paid attention, there's been a resurgence of really visible street activism in West Africa around frustrations that people have felt for sometimes decades, that has poured out on the street, and that has shown the resilience and the desire of especially young people, but a wide range of people to act. We start with Niger, we have my own country, Burkina Faso, Mali recently, Nigeria today, where you see very clearly that we know that the world is not where it should be, that the level of oppression that has been the case for so many years cannot continue, and you can only push it down for so long, where people that are marionetted at some point will stand and will step up. And one of the things that this has led to is this growth, be it with La Lucha and DRC, of a lot of these youth and social movements across the continent. And a few years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, a few of them gathered together here in Dakar with what they call the Popular University of Citizen Engagement, which was really a questioning of our social movement themselves, and saying, and I was quite involved in how do we then map out what are the key elements of these social movements, and how do we learn from movements like Ekta Parishad, and think through what do we become as social movements? How do we grow? How do we structure ourselves? Do these movements become political parties? Do they become political movements? Do they stay out on the streets? And what are the foundations, including nonviolence, that underlie the existence of these movements? And one of the key things, and this is what I will link very quickly to the manual that I thought was amazing in what it did, is this process allowed people to question the notion of, are you yourself perpetrating? We make the assumption that because we want to do good, that we are good. That because we stepped out to support change, that we don't necessarily question our own selves. And in the other areas in which we might be perpetrating something that may actually be keeping a system of violence that we officially do not adhere to. And this is why I think this manual, just to come back to it before I close, is crucial in anyone engaged in activism, period, but also anyone consciously looking at activism in a nonviolent way, in the way that all of us should be looking at. So just to simply, and then because there's so many parts of the manual that I think are fascinating, but this part for me, and I think you mentioned it, Hardy, this whole, it forces yourself to question internally and say, in what are the areas in my life, the areas in my work that I start from that are then contributing to the work that I do outside. So that's one, because that's the personal is the one that leads us into the systemic. The personal is social, the personal is political. So in the world in which we live, how do we associate those two? And as social movements, how do we question that as individual first, question that within our movements, and then step outside and try to create a world that is reflective of our values and of the nonviolence that we choose to live every day. And I'll stop here.
I feel like we could go on for a while. I would love to ask you a number of follow-up questions, Valerie. Thank you for your sharing the insights, wisdom, and experience. We will move to Mu, and then we will come back in discussion. Thank you again.
Thank you.
So, Mu, if you would join, Sambun Chungprampri, Mu, is an executive secretary of the International Network of Engaged Buddhists, a worldwide Buddhist activist network. He is a Thai social activist working for peace and justice in Asia. His focus has been with grassroots efforts to empower civil society in Burma, Laos, Cambodia, and Thailand, where, of course, in particular, events in Thailand have been really worldwide news over the last several weeks. Mu, welcome, and would love to invite you to share a bit about your work and also intersections that you see with what's been said so far. Thank you.
Well, good evening from Bangkok. Well, first of all, I would like to say that I fortunate also to link up with Ekta Parishad, with Raja Gopal and also Ramesh for many years. And last year I went to Delhi with my teachers, Sulak Sivalaksa, to attend the start for the peace march, from India to Switzerland. That also is very inspiring. And also, our journal, Seeds of Peace, that we have been published for 36 years. Also, we put this the manual to introduce it in our journal also. That also sent out to around the world, especially also among the Buddhist community, activist community also. And I really like the Ramesh mentioned about the realization. Also, as Hadi said, this right now across the street, we have the young people in Thailand protest nearly every day. 100,000 of them, and tonight also they're bringing street art for democracy. Right, Thailand also is we are when Ramesh mentioned about realization, nowadays a lot of young people also they are try to seeking for the information. Even though you look into Thailand, it look like a free country and so on and so forth. But in reality, we have so many layers of power that be in the country. And also a lot of young people now they come out and they're asking how the government or power that be in our society, including military or even with the monarch, spend our tax, or how the poor people or the people in the country can access to a fair resources in the country. These kind of thing are the questions that the young people came out, which is also is a part of the process of the realization. And every day that the movement is going on for democracy, build up leadership, and also put it in coming out from the grassroots, which is also is a learning process. Similar to also as I come from the Buddhist activist community, also as in India, Dr. Ambedkar, he has been mentioned about this kind of thing is also the process of that the people get educated and also they agitate and also that they can organize. This kind of thing also is a process that to build up what we call is a grassroots democracy and have more participatory democratic process, in all levels. And at the same time, also Thailand is not just stand out alone. Also, a lot of, as you know, that these young people also, they link up. For example, I don't know whether you have heard about the word Multi Alliance. You know that these young people, they also link up with the protester in Hong Kong, also in Taiwan, that the Multi Alliance. And also recently, I saw some photo that also even Chai, you know, Multi in India also link up into this kind of alliance. That also is helping, you know, perhaps that also this, you know, the nonviolence activism, also, you know, the manual. Actually, I chose some of the young people that leader of the protest. But also, in fact, also some of these young leaders that is they are protesting at the moment. Also, very much also link up with our organization as well as in the civil society movement in Thailand as well. And also, as you know, the Mr. Sulak Sivalaksa has been, you know, quite a well-known, you know, social activist in Thai society and also in the region for many years. He also is a link up with these young people. And also we have also the program we call Young Awakening Leadership Training Program. That also to help to bring up, you know, the young leaders with the what we call as a contemplative education. That also is when we are talking about the problem that we are facing is similar in Buddhist terminology. Also, we are seeing as a suffering, and also we try to see the root cause of suffering, whether as a personal level or into the social level or into the ecological level. This kind of thing also is we also see it have to work out from the inner to the outer for peace, and also is a calling for the justice, and also to see how is the structural violence, that how we can organize among ourselves, especially those who are voiceless, to advocate and also challenge to the power. And this also is a lot. Actually, is I, you know, after listening this also, I'm thinking also perhaps that also we can slowly also in our movement, the network of engaged Buddhists, we also can think about how to develop a manual. Also, we have a lot of Buddhist nonviolence activists, you know, around the world also. For example, you know, from the Tibetan community like Dalai Lama or the others, or even from Vietnam during the Vietnam War, or even the later, or even in Myanmar, in Thailand, in many countries, that also we can bring that experience together. I think that also is, I think from joining on this tonight, I also thinking that we can work together and also we can exchange our stories of activism, nonviolence activism together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mu. Thank you very much for those comments. We are pretty much right on time, which is fantastic. Not just an insightful and wise group of speakers, but a disciplined group of speakers too. So we have 10 minutes and would love to invite you all back now and really welcome any questions or discussion. If people who are listening have questions or comments, you can put them in the chat and or raise your hand, and we would love to hear from you. We'll give 30 seconds and see what pops up. And if nothing pops up, I have a few questions. And I have not moderated a webinar before, so I need to make sure that I am not missing them. All right. Okay, great, wonderful. First question is simply, is the guide already published? If yes, can we have a link to it? I'd like to ask my colleague Bruce Pearson, who you all cannot see, but who is managing tech. Thank you, yay, Bruce. If you can drop a link to the guide into the chat. And then from Julius Okoth, zooming from Nairobi, Kenya. Hello, Julius. Good to hear from you. Julius would like to ask Ramesh Sharma whether the caste system affects the movement in any way. Great question, Julius. Ramesh, please.
Thank you. So yes, your question is very relevant in Indian context. And that's how in my introduction I said that we are focusing among the marginalized community, and they are the tribals, they are the Dalits, they are the fisher folks, they are the nomads or single women, or the other groups, homeless people, or this the daily wage earner, etc. Regarding the caste system, yes, you are probably you know better that the large sum of the poor people, the large sum of landless and homeless poor, they are from the tribal and the Dalit communities. And that's how, since beginning, the focus of Ekta Parishad is to work with this community. And I'm very happy to tell you here that nearly 80% plus activists and the cadres in Ekta Parishad, they are from the same community. That's how this whole process of building the leadership from bottom, it's the whole idea came. So yes, we have, I mean, in most of our fight, they are the one who are in the forefront. I remember when we did negotiation after our long walk in 2007, that was actually meant for the indigenous people to ensure land to each and every indigenous people. When we had a negotiation in 2012 that for housing land for each and every homeless poor, that focused for the Dalit community and the other homeless poor. So these are always we keep in our mind, and that's how this whole campaign is bringing their voices in the forefront.
Great, thank you, Ramesh. And another question from Gail Presby. Thanks, Gail. I see some representation of Buddhism on your panel, and Gandhi was mentioned once. How do you work to include many religions and avoid conflict between religions? I think that's relevant, and we can open it up to all. Great question. Thank you again, Gail. Who wants to go first? Raise your hand if religious tension has been if you have seen that be an issue in activism before, and potentially uniting people before in your situations. Yes. So how if that's true, whether it is Christian, Muslim, Hindu, you name it, how is it, or Buddhist Christian, you name it, or Buddhist Muslim, how is it that is handled in a way that can strengthen activism rather than divide people? I know there are thoughts, and I know you're all being polite. Someone jump in the water.
Ramesh bhai, bataiye.
And Valerie first.
Sure, I'll
Yeah,
jump in.
please.
I'll go back to something that Ramesh said earlier as he was speaking, which is around leadership. And it has worked well where very consciously part of building the movement has been clear that, again, when you look at as a basis of nonviolence, it allows for people to step in and being their entire selves, whether it be different ethnicities, different groups, different religions. And it's very clear from the beginning, we've seen religion being used as a divider, but that's as a purpose to actually create violence. When it is being used by leadership as a divider, there's an intention there for violence. When you start going mine above yours, mine first above yours, that is violent. in the thought and in the divisive nature. And I'll go back to say where I have seen it work, both in Burkina, which is the country is very, very conscious of those divisions, be it in politics, be it in groups, be it in organizations, very clear. I mean, recently somebody was put in jail for simply having a hateful conversation on Facebook. This is how we take this very seriously. And that is driven by whatever leadership of whatever group. And if it's consciously ingrained in the heads, and when I say leadership, it's not just at the political highest leadership of any subgroup and any small group, that's when that does not become a problem, but it becomes a source of richness for the group that is actually working together.
Thank you, Valerie.
I think
Maybe one other comment?
Mo wants to say something.
Okay. Well, with my experience, I've been working in Myanmar in the past 20 years. And, as you know, that the issue on Buddhist and Muslim came up, recently, there should be different approaches to dealing with this issue. Some we have to work to help to strengthen the moderate groups, religious group, moderate religious leader to have more dialogue and so on. But at the same time, also we have to get into the hardcore group, the extreme group. That also we should work with them, also get them into the process, as Ramesh said, realization, which is not that easy, but we have to do it. Otherwise, our activism, it will be just a kind of the, goody working with the moderate, which is never ending. We have to get into that kind of the hardcore, which is, I think that we need to build it up. With my experience, also right now we have the International Forum on Buddhist-Muslim relations that we work at the regional level as well. As you know that in Southeast Asia, 600 million people, 40% are Buddhist and 43% are Muslim. That is over 80% population in ASEAN is, belong to Buddhist and Muslim. We have to really work that hand in hand together. And we have been living together for centuries, but the issue come up, how we can help to slowly solving that kind of problems.
Great, thank you. Well, the chat has many questions and I really want to ask them, and we're at time. So Bruce, do you want to comment how we dealt with this in the past? I'd love to be able to share some of these questions afterwards and have people perhaps write answers and we can post them or something in the webinar record. I want to though, we have to close. And so what I'd like to do is ask each of you to take a minute, and you use it however you want. If you have closing comments, it can be everything from here's how you can contact me to some reflections. And if you're finding your mind is blank because you have so many ideas about which way to go, one suggestion would be to think of some of the greatest strengths and opportunities that you foresee over the next year that people can build on, and talk about that in your particular context. So I could wait to see who wants to go first, or I could encourage Kush to go first. And I think I'll encourage Kush, if you're willing, to start with a few closing thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you once again, Hardy, and to Mo and Valerie and Ramesh bhai, and to all of you amazing people who took out the time to be here. Please go through the manual on ICNC's website. You could also look at more of Ekta Parishad's work on ektaparishadindia.org. And if you would like to reach out to me, please look me up on LinkedIn, Kush. I wish you all the best on this journey that you have undertaken on nonviolent activism. And remember that we are all here in this together. So more strength to you.
Thank you, Kush. Great. Mu.
Well, it's really lovely to meet all of you here, and also keep in touch. We should build that kind of as the Buddha said, is Kalyana Mitra. is spiritual friendship that can help to support each other for a longer term. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mu. Valerie, please.
Just two very quick things. First is thank you for bringing us together. And hopefully we can also continue to get engaged and work together in some way and learn from the experiences of each other. Second thing is don't read this book. And I mean use it, because it's not something you read. Use it. And it's immediately the moment I read it, I said, can I sit with my team and my colleagues and other people that I work with to go through it? I think it's really transformational in the way. So don't think of it as a book, think of it as a workbook. And I really, really would encourage everybody. I'm thankful that you went through the process of giving us this gift, and really want to encourage people to actually go through it. It will challenge you and hopefully make your own journey and your own work better.
Great. Thank you, Valerie. Ramesh, bring us home.
Yeah, thank you. So thanks again to Hadi and the entire ICNC team to giving us this opportunity to produce a manual and to present to all of you. And on behalf of Ekta Parishad, on behalf of all of us, Hadi, a lot of thanks to you. I mean, lastly, I always, in these current context of COVID and socio-political economic crisis, I always do remember what Martin Luther King said long back. Today we have, we don't have a choice between the non-violence or the violence, but we have a choice between the non-violence and non-existence. So I think we have to understand the real spirit of this strong words. Thank you. Thanks again.
Great. Well, that concludes our webinar. I want to thank everyone who participated and joined. I want to, of course, thank our wonderful speakers. I would love to see you all again. I hope we can all sit in a room together and talk longer. Really thank you for your work, your experience, and sharing your insights and time with us today. And thanks to my colleague, Bruce Pearson, for doing the organizing of this, for managing tech right now. Thank you, Bruce. And let's go forth. And I hope we see each other again soon. Take care.
Thank you.